During February, we celebrate Black History Month, in particular the pioneers from Booker T. Washington and Frederick Douglass to sports figures Jackie Robinson and Muhammad Ali. Many names are familiar, as are their achievements. But more than a celebration, Black History Month is also about education, a chance to learn about other historic figures whose stories are largely unknown. Jeremy Schaap now on some black athletes frozen out of the history books.
These are not the faces of hockey. Of the four major team sports, hockey is by far the whitest. The conventional wisdom holds that the game was pioneered and codified by ruddy-faced men of French and Scotch-Irish extraction, men who looked nothing like these men. But it turns out that the game has never been lily white, not even 100 years ago. Not anyway, according to historians George and Darrell Fausty. They argue that hockey's roots are black and American.
A lot of this history was either conveniently ignored, lost, or simply forgotten.
The brothers Fausty are the authors of Black Ice, the lost history of the colored hockey league of the Maritimes. Their thesis is simple, yet astounding. Hockey as we now know it, the slap shot, athletic goaltending and skating, was introduced not by the white men who generally get the credit, but years earlier in Nova Scotia by the sons and grandsons of American slaves.
One of the biggest obstacles we have in revealing this research is the fact people say, no, it can't be true. We've already credited certain individuals with some of these innovations. You must be wrong.
The story begins not in Canada, but here in Jericho, New York, on Long Island. Today, the Maine Made Inn is a restaurant. In the mid-19th century, it was the home of Abigail Hicks, who would hide runaway slaves in her attic. In fact, the Underground Railroad on Long Island, which ferried slaves to freedom in Canada, was operated out of this nearby church.
Runaways came up, and a lot of them, they hid out so they can continue up to Canada, and a lot of them stayed in the community.
Drakeford Levi's ancestor, Eliakim Levi, was among those who stayed on Long Island, helping hundreds of other runaways find their way to Canada, mostly to Halifax, the capital of Nova Scotia, the rugged, windswept province 700 miles north and east of Long Island. Eventually, these former slaves would help create the Colored Hockey League.
If you look at the history of the CHL, you see that the real legacy of the CHL is that this is the Underground Railroad legacy, and that is the legacy that gave us modern hockey.
The Fausties say that the Colored Hockey League was organized more than 30 years after the last runaway slaves reached Nova Scotia in about 1895. Initially a church league, the players adhered to a declaration of faith that emphasized sportsmanship and athleticism over brute force.
When I found out this league had used the Bible as their rule book for playing hockey, I said, wow, this is profound.
Wayne Adams was born and raised in Halifax. His father, grandfather, and great-uncle played in the Colored Hockey League.
The church did everything in terms of the social status and social development of black people in this province and throughout North America.
They saw this as an opportunity to move up socially and climb up the social ladder and gain equal footing with the larger white community, with the ultimate goal being that one day blacks will be equal and sport will be the catalyst to make that occur.
In the absence of brawling, the hockey played in the CHL was a lively, offensively creative game. 50 years before Boom Boom Geoffrion introduced the slap shot to the NHL, the Fausties say it was a staple of the game in the CHL.
You see references describing what they called then baseball hockey, which was a slap shot. They didn't have the name for it back then. But one thing or another, they were slapping that puck down the ice. 50 years ahead of everybody else.
The Fosties claim that the first goaltender to play not just in an upright position was Henry Franklin of the Dartmouth Jubilees, who stood 3'6".
Henry Braces Franklin was aggressive in goal. The argument's been the reason he was the first player to go down on ice was, as some people have sarcastically said, he was already there.
In its heyday, just after the turn of the 20th century, the CHL was flourishing. From Nova Scotia to nearby New Brunswick and Prince Edward Island, games might attract as many as 1,200 fans. Despite drawing from a relatively small portion of the population, black teams sometimes defeated the best of the white teams. Here, for instance, is a story about the Chibuktos, a powerful white team, falling to the all-black Eureka's 9-7 in 1899.
Often when the black teams had a good showing against them, you never had another repeat game. It was almost like, oh my God, we've had the hell scared out of us, we're not going to go back again.
Shortly after World War I, the league collapsed, and within a generation, it had all but disappeared from the collective memory of even most black Nova Scotians. The story of the CHL seemed to have been lost.
The Hockey Hall of Fame in Toronto, how do they recognize these innovations?
They don't.
But when it's built, the Black Hockey and Sports Hall of Fame in Nova Scotia will. Craig Smith is its president.
You go get a hockey book and look at a hockey book in the history of Canada. You don't see anybody in there that looks like me skating on the ice. You don't see any stories about any black hockey league in Nova Scotia or any contributions by blacks to the league other than Willie O'Ree breaking the color barrier in '58.
49 years ago, Willie O'Ree became the first black man to play in the National Hockey League. Smith wants to see those who came before O'Ree given their due.
The greatest recognition that I think that can be made is for them to say that, yes, this league was here, this league withstood the test of time, and this league gave a lot to what we now have in the NHL.
What does the game of hockey owe these pioneers?
They owe them recognition. They owe them the respect that's been void for 100 years.
Unfortunately, the proper due and the proper respect that's been due a lot of black athletes in this country has been slow in coming. And so now to go back and say, no, it was black people that revolutionized that sport, that's not going to happen easily. Not without a fight, that's for sure.
Jeremy Schaap reporting. Over the NHL All-Star break in Dallas, George and Daryl Fostie presented their findings on the Colored Hockey League to the NHL Diversity Task Force. The NHL listened and is currently in discussion with the Fosties in regards to their research. However, there is still no official recognition of the Colored Hockey League.